meeting to order at 6:05 PM. Our first order of business this evening will be to approve the January 24th Selectmen's minutes.
So move.
I can't.
Yes, that one you can. The 24th. I wasn't
Okay, second.
All those that were here in favor?
The three of us.
Yes, okay.
I got the date.
Now-
wrong.
All right, now, February 14th,
I
2019
can't.
meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move.
So
moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Motion passes. Okay, and it's time for the public forum. This is an opportunity for anyone who wants to address the Board of Selectmen with any issues that are not currently on our agenda this evening. Okay, I have just one quick thing. I was contacted yesterday by one of the members of our community, and they had asked about getting sand at the town barn. And I told them I'd put it out tonight. You can go up and you can get 2 buckets, go up during business hours. If somebody's there, they'll probably even help you load it up. But you are entitled to go up and get sand. It's been a very wet and frozen winter, and everything's pretty icy. We don't want anyone getting hurt, so. Okay, that's my 2 cents. All right, we have some liquor license renewals and some amusement permits to go through here. And I'll say this in advance, all of the appropriate town officials have signed off on all of these. So the first one this evening is consider a renewal liquor license application submitted by W&A Incorporated, DBA Cape Pier Chowder House, 79 Pier Road.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? So moved. Yes, and one recused.
One refused.
Consider a renewal liquor license application submitted by Kennebunkport Inn LLC, DBA Kennebunkport Inn, 1 Dock Square.
So moved.
Second? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Consider a special amusement permit submitted by the Kennebunkport Inn, 1 Dock Square.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Consider a renewal liquor license application submitted by Bolton Hotel Corp., DBA The Colony Hotel, 140 Ocean Ave.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Consider a special amusement permit for the same.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Consider a renewal liquor license submitted by the Ramp Grill LLC, DBA Pier 77, 77 Pier Road.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Consider a special amusement permit submitted by Yelson Kale of the Ramp Grill LLC, DBA Pier 77, Restaurant, 77 Pier Road.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right, here we go. Okay, number 11, consider ordinance amendments, street numbering. Lori, would you like to speak to that?
Yep, I'm going to invite Chief Everett to the podium. This is the numbering ordinance we discussed at your last meeting, and the chief's just going to give you a quick update on it.
Yeah, so I applied the ordinance as it was written to the areas of town that we were looking at. And while it fixed issues along some of it, it created other ones. And so really the only thing to do was kind of go back to the drawing board and change how it's written. Has to do with how the numbers are going to be assigned. It had said based on driveway, and it would have meant a lot of changes, so we moved it to the front door. That's the major change in it. Some other minor changes are some of the longer little streets that we have that maybe only service 2 houses, because the ordinance as it was written before, it was 3 houses, and they would rename that right away. But some of them are pretty long, you can't see it from the road. There's plenty of places for other little roads to come off of, so we thought if people wanted to, a private road that served 2 structures could be named if they wanted it to. I think it'll save us, if they do it, it'll save us some heartache down the road, or more work, I guess.
Yeah, better take some time and get it done right. Is
And
that all you have, Jeff?
The only other thing was we made a change in the compliance of it. We upped the fine and made how we're sending the notifications out a little different. But that's pretty much it
We're
in a
giving an
nutshell.
additional notification prior
Yes, there was an
to-
additional
prior to
notification.
enforcement.
Yep.
And how much time do you give them before you fine them?
It ends up being 45 days. The first notice will have a 30-day period to be brought into compliance without any fine. It starts the day the letter from the town is mailed. After 30 days and the property is not in compliance, a second notice is sent with using certified mail. And then the 30 days, 45 days from that is when the fines would start.
Can you give me an example of a non-compliance?
In the ordinance, it's written on how and where the numbering should be on your house. You should remove any numbering that doesn't have anything to do with your address.
Okay.
Putting it in a contrasting, at least 4-inch high number, close to the front door as you can is a type
Okay,
thing.
thank you.
You good, Jay?
I am?
All right, thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you for your hard work. Okay, waterfront ordinance. I was at the meeting last night. If it's all right, I'll speak to this, Lori. In Cape Porpoise Harbor, in Cape Porpoise, we have a limited amount of deep water moorings, and therefore, the state allows us to have a list in order for people to get new moorings in the harbor, and that list is supposed to go by the dates on which you applied. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to ask everybody to renew annually, because we've got dates down there that people applied 15 years ago, and chances are that their address and certainly their home phone is probably no longer valid. So we just want to be able to keep up with and have a more efficient system and make sure that, people who are on the list still wish to be on the list, therefore that those who do want to be on the list will be able to move up in a timely fashion.
So the ones that are on the list now will be notified?
Everybody will be notified, yes. Yeah. Okay, number 12. Consider a request from Goose Rock's Beach Advisory Committee regarding restricting Jeffrey's Way to local traffic only and restricting motorized vehicles on the beach.
So Bob Sherman and Richard Driver
Yeah.
here from the Goose Rock's Beach Advisory Committee to discuss our proposal from the committee.
Yeah, I'm going to address just the Jeffrey's Way, and Bob Sherman will address the motorized vehicles. This came about with some letters from residents at Jeffrey's Way, and they had two arguments. One was they're tired of people pulling into their driveway to turn around. I mean, you have to know, Jeffrey's Way is a narrow street. It's an extension of New Biddeford Road. It dead ends into the beach. There's no turnaround. At best you can do is a K-turn, and it's still somewhat difficult. So that was the residents' complaint, and then they also raised the question of safety, because it is a major access to the beach for pedestrian traffic. We have a large number of cars that park not just on Kings Highway, but on New Biddeford Road, and people traverse the street or the walkway on New Biddeford Road, and then Jeffrey's Way. And there is a fair amount of traffic, people on Jeffrey's Way, people dropping off their kids, their beach stuff, their kayaks, and what have you. And we also have at least two commercial operations that go down Jeffrey's Way with a pickup truck and a large trailer with kayaks. And there's no way that they can turn around, so they have to back out of Jeffrey's Way. And we also have the fact that we've got 20-some-odd new houses that are going to be built off of New Biddeford Road. So the traffic, pedestrian traffic on Jeffrey's Way is clearly going to increase. The Beach Advisory Committee considered the issue at 3 meetings. voted unanimously to recommend that Jeffreys Way be a local traffic only. And that would preclude drop-offs, and it would also preclude the delivery of kayaks. Now, keep in mind, the kayak companies don't deliver just to Jeffreys Way. They deliver to people's homes, and the people then transport the kayaks down to the beach. But I guess it is probably people who are summer residents, not of Goose Rocks, but who are visiting Goose Rocks and they have a parking permit and they want to rent a kayak. Well, they're going to, those companies are going to have to find some other way because the argument is, well, there hasn't been an accident yet. I've been around too long and heard that argument too many times. The idea of government enacting certain restrictions is to prevent the first accident, not to respond to the first accident, but to prevent it. And the Beach Advisory Committee thinks that it's important to make Jeffreys Way a local traffic only. Now, in terms of drop-off, there are other areas that people can drop off, and the area, the extension of Kings Highway beyond Jeffreys Way, there's a sidewalk on the other side of the street. There's no parking there, and it could easily be a 5-minute drop-off, but no parking. It could be striped so that people have an opportunity to offload, but they can't park there. They'll have to find a parking place elsewhere. There is let me just finish. There is a handicap parking space on Jeffreys Way, and we toyed with recommending moving it. We asked the chief and Lori to take a look at it, and we just, we're tied into this 173 parking spaces. We can't increase it, we can't decrease it, and we didn't find, or they didn't find, a place that was really reasonable to move one additional parking space, whether it would be on Kings Highway or New Bedford Road or what have you. So we're going to recommend leaving that one handicap parking space on Jeffreys Way. I'm sorry, Stu.
My question, Richard, thank you for your patience there. Relegating all pickup and drop-off activity to the outside of Jeffreys Way seems to me to be forcing it into an area that would otherwise, by what you said already, be fairly congested, because it is where New Bedford Road comes in. It's where all of Kings Highway that is headed outbound from Goose Rocks is going to be passing. And so you've got quite a busy intersection there. And if you're forcing people out of that dead end into that area, wouldn't that create more of a hazard than less?
I don't think so. If you, the extension of Kings Highway, there's Kings Grant, you would be
Yep.
heading towards Kings Grant.
Right.
So if you go, you're traveling east on Kings Highway, you pass New Bedford Road, the stop sign, and on the left-hand side, there is a sidewalk, and a drop-off there is no more of a congestion problem than parking on Kings Highway, because you've got the same width of a road, and it's just you're allowing people to drop off. I mean, one of the areas that the chief and Laurie talked about, if we were to move the handicap spot, was actually there. But because there is a house and a driveway and what have you, we figured it just wouldn't be appropriate. But but in terms of a drop-off, somebody there for 5 minutes, it seems reasonable. It's not the kind of congestion that you have at the intersection when you're heading towards Route 9 on New Bedford Road, or coming into the beach from Route 9.
I don't object to the location you're talking about for pickup or drop-off. To me, I have no issue with that. It seems like a very reasonable spot. My concern is that people are creatures of habit, and if they're used to dropping off right where Jeffries Way ends, but they're used to pulling in there, my gut tells me people are gonna be stopping right at the corner there and offloading and trying to move people in and out of that, whereas before they might have pulled in and then either backed out or turned around.
You know, it's probably a learning process for people. We have the summer beach people, part of the police department, and they can just direct people not to. And a sign there, there's a space before the stop sign. You're heading east on Kings Highway. So, yeah, people might pull in there. And a sign, no stopping, no standing, should alleviate it. But we all know that we have people who are anxious to get to the beach, and they'll do anything, and it's the bane of the chief's existence to have to handle, the cars that are parked here and there, and, not in legitimate parking spaces and congestion of traffic. I mean, we've lived through it. Your parents are at Goose Rocks Beach. You've been there. It's not the way it was when, 20, 30 years ago. And we just have to live with it. But we can do some things to make sure that we avoid accidents, somebody getting hurt. And this is really just an accident ready to happen.
Where's he talking about dropping off?
It would be over here.
Over here? Mm-hmm. So,
There's a
Facing east
sidewalk
or
on
west,
this
on
side, on
the
this side, on this side
south
here.
or the north side of the road, Richard?
It would be.
On the Route 9
I
side.
believe it would be the Route 9 side, which I guess is the north.
So facing back toward, so the vehicles, in
So-
theory, if they were going with traffic, would be
no
facing
drop-off
back
here.
towards the beach.
I can understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can understand not having vehicles come and go, like kayak trucks or cars coming up and down, backing out, but I'm having a hard time thinking about not letting people get out there and just get out of the car and walk down the road. It's pretty,
If you say no local traffic, then you're going to preclude the kayak people and the general public to go down there. I don't think that you can, well, I mean, maybe Amy could have a suggestion, but no commercial traffic.
That's not gonna fix your biggest problem.
No, it isn't, because you still have the cars having to go down there, offload, either back up or do a K-turn. And as I said, K-turn is, it's a couple of turns before you can head around the other way.
Has anybody suggested putting in a turnaround?
Where-
Opening up the road a little bit at the end so that cars can turn around and go?
There's really no,
I don't think that's
Yeah.
wide enough.
I don't see how that would be possible without cutting it into the two properties on the end of the beach, without going into the dune, which isn't really an option.
No.
No, you'd have to condemn property in order to create the space for a turnaround.
so if we're gonna do that drop-off on the other side of the road, we'd have to have a sidewalk crossing and everything, a sidewalk crossing.
Well, there's one, it's not, you can't see it here, but there is one down in that
Down here.
area somewhere. I just can't remember exactly where it is on there, but there is one over there.
It's on that side of on that corner.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
I'm just going to make a comment, because I'm on a dead-end road. And years and years and years ago, two of the neighbors offered pieces of their property so that the cars can turn around. And if this is such a big problem for the people, maybe they would offer a corner of their property.
You
I'm
can't- There's
just
a
saying.
tree there within the resource protection area. You can't take that down.
It looks like a bush.
And Sheila, it's not, the recommendation from the Beach Advisory Committee is not so much for the residents of Jeffries Way that, they're inconvenienced because people pull into their driveway.
I can
It's
understand
the
that.
sa-
Yeah.
it-
I can understand that.
But
Well,
that,
that's
that's
why-
minor. The major issue is the safety. Because you have pedestrians, I mean, little kids and the beach stuff, beach gear and what have you. And in the summertime, it is more of a pedestrian walkway than it is a driveway.
So you're saying are you having a problem with the pedestrians coming down Jeffrey's Way? In that you want them
Well,
not to come down Jeffrey's?
No,
No.
not pedestrians,
No.
it's just vehicle traffic.
Okay, okay.
Just it's the vehicle traffic with the pedestrians. So the idea is to eliminate the vehicular traffic. And you can do it in the form of a regulation, according to the beach use, beach use ordinance.
What exactly are you suggesting, Richard?
Well, suggesting that you adopt a regulation that that designates Jeffreys Way a local street, local traffic only. I believe Amy has already drafted, or at least reviewed a draft of a regulation pertaining to the motorized vehicles, which Bob's going to talk about in a minute. And this would be the same thing, just a regulation. If you remember when the ordinance was adopted, we didn't want to have to go back to a public ordinance change. And there is a provision that allows you as the selectman to adopt a regulation that pertains to the beach. And this clearly is something that pertains to the beach.
Do you think a sign and no drop-off or whatever?
Well, I think, as I said to Stu, it's going to be a learning process. I believe it is, local traffic only. People will still try to drop off and, they'll get a warning and the first season will probably be a little bit of a pain for the police department and the beach guys. But there's something that needs to be done before we have more of a problem than we do now. And, those additional, was it 25 homes that are going to be built there? You figure 4 to 8 people out of each one of them, adding to what we already have in the way of traffic. It's a major access point to the beach. Comparable to the one on Dyke Road. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Hi, my name's Bill Yunker. I grew
We've
up.
heard of you.
I grew up right there because my parents' house or my mom's house is right near that corner. Are you going to create a drop-off spot across the street on that corner? Or are you going to eliminate a parking space, move a fire hydrant? What are we doing over there? There's parking right to the corner, almost, right to the stop sign now.
On Kings Highway,
Yeah.
and on New Bedford Road, both of them. No, if you go,
So it's my folks' house.
Yes.
if you go past Jeffreys Way, you're heading
Yep.
east, past Jeffreys Way, and just past Jeffreys Way, on the left-hand side, there is the sidewalk is extended there, and it's a perfect place for people to have.
Okay, but there's
a
parking there.
There is no.
Okay, there's parking within a car length of the stop sign, I believe.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Lori?
On the other side of the street, yeah, there is a
There is,
few
yeah.
parking spots.
On the other side of the street?
No,
Yeah.
on the north, on the Route 9 side of that part of Kings Highway, there's parking there. And it's actually very tight when there are cars parked there for people to get out of, like my folks' driveway and one of the people right on the corner. Because they back out onto the road there. I was just saying, if you're gonna create a drop-off spot out of one of the parking places, great, but if you're not, I don't
We
think
can't, we
there's
can't
room.
do that. I mean, we're
Okay.
locked into 173 parking spaces, and we can't eliminate
I
any of them.
just wanna say, when I was a kid, there was parking on both sides of Jeffrey's Way, just so you know.
But that's a long time ago. Bill.
Yeah, 60 years ago, right? But still, yeah, I just think, unless you find a drop-off
I think we
spot.
need to go take a look
I
at
think
this.
you're right.
We can't make, I don't think we can make a decision
Yeah, this isn't a
evening.
tonight thing,
Yeah, this
but-
is not,
Yeah.
a ton-
We're just listening.
yeah,
There-
yeah, we're not gonna vote on it.
There's one other consideration. If you drive down Kings Highway, adjacent to many of the entry points to the beach, there are striped, yellow striped areas. And if people pulling in there could offload, and they're not allowed to park there, but it's a perfect area, and I'm sure they do it already. So, I mean, it isn't eliminating all offloading areas. But, you're gonna have to balance. Is it the convenience of somebody who wants to get to the beach quickly versus public safety? That's the issue.
Well, I think that we should go down and take a look.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I do,
It's worth a field trip.
yeah.
Before I get to my issue, can I just tag on to this? I mean,
Sure.
I've gone up and down Kings Highway quite a bit and looked at it and seen this intersection, and I think that there's room. First of all, I think we should consider creating an official drop-off space. It's not a parking space, and I don't think, Richard, and Amy may need to look at this, that it would violate the, quote, parking agreement that we have, the 173 spaces. I think a drop-off space is not a parking space. If somebody goes in, drops off, limited to 3 minutes, blah, 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 blah. I also think the chief who's going to enforce this needs to be part of this decision, because I think clearly his input would be very helpful here. Thirdly, as I've driven down Kings Highway from the west to the east, just before you get to Jeffrey's Way, there is room to create an official, in my mind, drop-off space. People wouldn't have to cross the street. You wouldn't have a lot of traffic trying to get from that space into Jeffrey's Way. I think it's a place that's worthy of consideration, and if the chief does it, I'd have him look at that space as a possibility. I'm
Good
done.
advice. Thank you, Bob.
You ready for mine?
Yeah.
Okay, so have you all, I assume you all have looked at the regulation prohibiting operation of certain vehicles on the beach. I want to just commend the person who drafted this. I assume it's Amy, because she's done a great job here. This idea that, in fact, certain exclusions exist for town employees, government agencies, drivers, et cetera. And for those of us who get involved with a beach cleanup once a year, this is incredibly helpful to us to execute a simple cleanup of the beach. Being able to get a vehicle on there, whether we're pulling lobster traps out or not. Most recently, thanks to Lori and the new harbor master, I've made contact with the officials, and now I had stacked 5 lobster traps that were reusable, along with float gear and so forth, a whole pile of lobster traps that are clearly going to be put in the dumpster next spring, or this spring when we do our cleanup. And these guys took these 5 traps and they said, this is so-and-so's, I can use it for them, and so forth. So
I
being
think
a-
2 of those were mine, thanks.
were they really?
Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. No, seriously. I hear a lobster trap is a $100 bill these days.
Absolutely.
And so
yeah.
I'm going, okay, great. So I think this is a proposal for prohibiting operation, but necessary for the ones where we need to do it. I think it's great, and I would recommend your approval of this.
I'd like to tag on to what you just said. It hasn't happened last couple of years, but sometimes we get these storms and you have 100 to 150 traps come ashore on the beach. Usually, when that's the case, the lobstermen go down with their pickup trucks and pick them up.
Great.
And I don't want that to change.
Yeah.
I
And
think
we've
you're
done that.
spot
I
on.
usually just call communications and tell them I'm going on to the beach, and they're like, okay.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
but-
So this seems like a sort of a no-brainer. I don't know.
Looks good to me.
Good. So I recommend your approval. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Number 13, approve restrictions on weight limits on certain roads in accordance with paragraph 29 AMRSA, section 2395 in the Kennebunkport traffic and parking control. Mike, do you want to talk to us? I think we know what you're going to say, but
Yeah, it's the usual roads. We want to go March 1st to April 15th, and we do have an application process for people who would like to go on a posted road. That's on the website, and they can give us a call at Public Works, and we can talk to them about that, or just download it and get it to us. and
did
we'll
you
call
get a
back.
lot of applications last year?
We did 31, we approved 31 applications
okay,
for
good.
travel on
And
posted roads.
we had no issues?
Mostly it's just people who agree to take a small load on a big truck, and that's fine by us a lot of times.
There's a couple of homes being built on our street that are using pretty heavy equipment. I don't know if they've been in touch with you.
A lot of times, many of the builders are aware of the postings, and they've pre-staged, this time of year, they pre-stage. They understand what's going on, and they know they can go when it's cold.
And we're still pretty frozen right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. Do I have a motion for the posting of the roads?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, number 14, discussion of extension of current solid waste contract. Lori, I will start off with you, please.
So our current solid waste contract, it was with Oceanside, and now Casella is the owner, so it's with Casella, is up in August of this year. And we have been in discussions because the backdrop of recycling and solid waste has changed, and certainly costs have increased. Recycling, we discussed at our last meeting. I'm going to ask Mike to come up and give you an update of where we are. And also, we have Carl and Nate representing Casella here to give you some insight as well.
There's a quick update on recycling processes. Under our current contract, Oceanside is responsible for all our recycling materials once they get on the truck. We have no tipping fee or disposal costs of our recycling. Currently, Oceanside's paying the come-as-you-may recycling fee at EcoMaine, which is this month. It changes every month. This month, it's gone to $130 a ton. So when we heard, when we talked to Carl about re-upping the contract, he said, when this re-ups, we're going to have to talk about this tipping fee. So Lori asked me to call EcoMaine, and I did speak with them, and they said that we could contract with them on an annual basis for $65 a ton we would pay to take recyclables. So we don't have to pay the come-as-you-go fee. If we agree to bring our recyclables there for a year, it'll be $65 a ton.
Do we
There-
know what that will mean in the budget? What the number will be?
That would be another $26,000. So, in the contract, there are a couple of out clauses. And what they say is after a year, that we would take a look back on what it costs for us to process your recyclables, whether there was any market value, et cetera. And that there could be a potential rebate if it costs less, and it also could cost more than the $65 a ton. So they have an ability to benefit us or charge us an additional fee. So this contract we just got yesterday afternoon, late. So we're still absorbing that information. As you'll remember last time, we talked about changing the recycling model, about how we might need to certainly do an educational campaign, be concerned about contamination. If our contamination is higher than an acceptable number, and they're looking for you to be under 5%, that you're going to pay an additional penalty. And that we also talked about limiting the amount of recyclables we take, having them at an identified location. So we've been exploring this new world we live in and different ways in which we can certainly continue to benefit the planet in Kennebunkport, but also address the market of recyclables in today's world. So do you want to invite Nate and Carl up to give us their wisdom?
We have Casella's people. Carl Eckstead, who been the formerly owner of Oceanside, and Nate is big boss at a Casella.
Well, good evening. Carl Eckstead, formerly the owner up as of November 1st. I did liquidate all the collection assets of Oceanside rubbish, and I still have an interest in the waste business from a standpoint. I do the long-haul trucking out of the Wells Transfer Station, tractor trailer-wise, to a variety of locations throughout the Northeast. So I haven't officially retired, and although I don't know where all my free time went because I'm still reasonably busy. And for the record, Mike and Lori had asked me if I was interested in extending the contract. I don't own Oceanside anymore. Casella Waste Pine Tree, operating under Pine Tree, has that contract at this point in time. So when they asked me, I talked to the folks at Casella Waste and said they'd like me to be involved in the renegotiations or discussions regarding solid waste and recycling. So I'm here kind of ad hoc. I don't have a fight in this at all, so to speak, but I can certainly give you some insight, if you'd like, in regards to the world of recycling. So I'm sure everyone at this point in time has pretty much heard about China and the markets being shut off. There's a shortage of disposal capacity throughout the Northeast, all the way into Ohio, believe it or not, and a lot of it is because the recycling markets. The only correction I'll make on Mike is this past month, we were notified that the price of recycling went to $135 a ton. So I'm not up privy as to the immediate discussions at 65, but my recommendation is read the contract and be sure of what you're signing. Because I had a contract with EcoMaine for all the years that we serviced the town of Kennebunkport, and when the market conditions changed, my contract went null and void. Not by my side of the equation, but theirs. And it was because there wasn't 50% cardboard in the waste stream, so therefore I started paying the premium, which I did not come back to the town and pass that through. I absorbed those losses, which until November 1st wasn't fun, but Casella, under the understanding of the relationship that we had with the contract, they've honored that. So in essence, you've been saving that $26,000 to roughly $50,000 a year in the cost of processing and recycling. There's not a lot of markets out there, 1 and 2 plastics maybe. Cardboard still is paying, as of this past month, a positive $25 a ton. But for the most part, your recycling is absolutely contaminated. It's primarily the 3 through 7 plastics, which end up being burned or landfilled ultimately, and the state of the world is not good. One of the reasons why I don't miss the collection side of business anymore. So I say that tongue in cheek because people are passionate about recycling, and to be making decisions as to whether or not you want to continue it, it comes down to the economics. The $65 per ton number for processing certainly can change the dynamics of the equation, but it really is, it's a political hotbed throughout the whole Northeast and across the entire country as to what happens with recycling. And unfortunately, an awful lot of it is being disposed of. That's the bottom line reality.
So what you're saying is, it really is almost a waste of money for us to even try and recycle, because the product in there is contaminated.
Certainly
It all
a-
goes
a-
into the
a great
incinerator
percentage-
anyway.
A great percentage of the material certainly does end up in disposal facilities because the markets are just so backed up. Your steel and your aluminum and your 1 and 2 plastics, there's still a home for it. But, EcoMaine, as of the last 3 or 4 months, they even had come out publicly and had said that much of the material, because it's plastic, it's oil-based and it burns really well, so it certainly they had no problem with burning it. And at $135 a ton, why wouldn't they?
So in the past year, we were paying about $137 a ton to collect and dispose of our recycling.
How much is that?
137. And so, meanwhile, with solid waste, we were probably $158 a ton. So because of this additional processing fee and the way recycling has changed, this coming year, we anticipate we'll be paying about $160 a ton for solid waste and $211 a ton for recycling. If we're to continue curbside recycling and sign a contract at $65 a ton, and they accept it at $65 a ton, there's no additional penalties or fees.
But how, but what I'm thinking is that the trash in the recycling is going into the incinerator anyway, because it,
Well, if there's enough contamination, EcoMaine hasn't said exactly what they're doing with those loads, but at some point, when it's very labor intensive, I have to believe that there is a cut point that they decide to move that along. There is also just a matter of, even though they say they're accepting all these recyclables, there are only certain ones that they can really generate revenue from. Others are costing them, which is why they're getting charged $135 a ton, because they're certainly trying to make up that deficit someplace.
have we thought about maybe offering a place, a dumpster, some kind of container, so that if people still wanted to save their cardboard, because that's acceptable, and their 1 and 2 plastics, which are acceptable, and it sounds like nothing else is?
You're stealing your aluminum still.
We're what?
Stealing the aluminum,
Okay, and,
then 1 and 2 plastics.
yeah.
But isn't most aluminum probably going into the returnable stream, Carl?
You'd be amazed at how many people don't do that.
Okay.
And so, basically, they're throwing them in the trash,
Quite a bit of it is,
but not in the recycling bin.
right.
Okay, so that,
I mean, you run
That's
the
ano-
whole gauntlet.
that's
and-
another
And for
issue.
me, I mean, just, I'm not here representing Casella or the town. I'm here for informational purposes, just to kind of help out, to give you, so I can give you more of a realistic overview at this
well,
point in time.
I guess
We
what I'm saying
appreciate
is,
it.
we could save the cost of the recycling, offer a place for people who still wanted to recycle cardboard and 1 and 2 plastics, so that we could continue to recycle the product that is recyclable, and then save ourselves some money.
But that's gonna cost money, because one, we gotta make sure people only
Are
put in 1 or 2.
Well, that's why it's separated.
Yeah, but we have
Or
to have
put in
somebody.
cameras.
I don't even
Most
know.
people go
Carl,
out
what
of
is
their way
1
to-
and 2
to do
plastic?
that.
What common,
Pretty diligent,
household items would we
I
have
don't
that
know.
would be
Really?
composed of
Yeah.
that?
Driving someplace to recycle?
I can't.
So can Nate come over to the,
Yep, sorry. By the way, my name's Nate Chapman. I'm the general manager for the Southern Maine Casella Division. So Carl so nicely handed that over to me this past November.
Can you tell I'm smiling?
So just to add on a little bit more education, so with your curbside recycling, we call it zero sort of Casella, Eco calls it single stream, it's the same mix, but somewhere around 70% of that mix is fiber. That's your papers and all that type of stuff. Between the fibers and the glass, that's what's killing the markets. There are no markets for that. Well, there's markets, but you pay. So the stuff that's good in recycling, there's not as much of it to help balance off that. We call it the ACR, it's the average commodity revenue, is what you can sell that product for the month. So those two commodities themselves drive that number down pretty hard. One thing that is hopefully gonna help these markets is, you may have heard, a company called Nine Dragons out of China going into the Rumford Mill.
Yep.
And what they're gonna do, I don't know all the ins and outs, but basically they're gonna take that fiber, that material that's not worth anything right now, that you pay to get rid of. they're gonna pulp it, make it virgin material again, and get that back over to China. So they're gonna make it clean before it goes. So we're hopeful that that will really help the markets, but that's, that's a year, 18 months out before they're up and running. So we don't know how that's gonna affect the markets, but we think it's gonna make it better.
And that's just fiber, not plastic.
That's fiber that they're gonna deal with, yeah. So it's just kind of really ugly, it was October of 17 when all this started to happen, so we're about a little over a year into the markets really being upside down. And everybody's struggling with it, and every time there's a new community that the contract's up, and it's kind of the big surprise that, you guys are talking about right now, and nobody really has the magic answer right now. But curbside programs do took many, many years to get them up and running in Maine. So from our perspective, we hate to throw it away after a year of tough times, but, at some point, if things don't get better, I mean, at EcoMaine, you can take your trash there for $70.50 and $135 for your recycling. So at some point, you say, well, why bother? That's just kind of the mindset right now, but.
Too bad.
It is, but it's a commodity. It's like anything else. It's going to have up and downs. We just never seen a low like this before, and we don't know when that's going to correct or if it's going to correct.
Hopefully it will.
Yes.
So one thing is we could go out to bid. Casella and has certainly let us know that they would like to negotiate a new contract. They're interested in staying with the town of Kennebunkport, right?
Absolutely.
And so if there is interest among the board, Michael and I will continue to negotiate that with them and bring you back a proposal. But part of that will be, what's our intention on the recycling. So we asked them to come tonight to update you on the market and answer any questions you have. It's certainly a complicated subject. But if you are so inclined, we will continue working with them on that.
If I could just add one quick thing, one of the first things I talked to Lori about was, Carl has a good program, has a good company. We were fortunate enough to buy that company, but we're not looking to make change, and that was my commitment to Lori. It's the same trucks out there, the same drivers, the same service. The logo on the side of the door has changed, but it's the same people. We don't want to. What's working, we don't need to fix. So
we can get rid of that recycling tipping fee. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it sounds like your friends at Eco are giving you a heck of a deal.
And we're willing to pass that on to you with no administrative cost.
Carl warned me.
One question I did have, and I don't know if it's even possible to answer, but I raised it the last time this conversation came up. I'm curious, is there any metric or statistic that you can give me that says, okay, if we're paying this for trash and this for recycling, what percentage of the recycling that we're paying that premium on winds up in the same place the trash winds up on? And in other words, what the rejection rate of what we're paying the higher rate for. Because what I'm grappling with is I want to do the right thing. I want to recycle because I believe in doing that. But if 80% of what we pay the higher price for winds up in the same place as the other stuff, it's a fool's errand. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and the other piece too is, that I didn't speak to, is contamination is really as big as the markets right now. So, and EcoMaine is dealing with it. We have a facility, you can go left to our facility, right to EcoMaine off the interstate, but once that material is contaminated, it has no chance of going anyplace. So, and that's one of the reasons why China kind of shut things down on everybody. So, and I don't know what the contract looks like, but, I think Carl was right, is to, read all the fine print, because they're charging back every other municipality that we work with right now for contamination. And they have it tiered, so anything over 5%, and, you drop off a load, and there's a guy with a clipboard kind of kicks it around, determines what that contamination percent is by volume, by what he's seeing, and then they charge back by tonnage on the entire load. So it can get costly if you can't stay under that 5% or whatever parameters they give you. I don't know, it might be different for you guys, but generally speaking, is they want less than 5%.
Do we have any historical data, though? Do we have anything that suggests to us how effective our recycling programs have been. In other words, what we're putting out there that's been taken away historically, what percentage of it has been deemed contaminated and therefore has been treated in the same way that trash is treated? Is there any answer to that? Is there any stat or data?
Since I'm out of the business now, anywhere from 75 to 100%.
It's been contaminated.
The deal that I had set up for years that I passed through to you was I would never receive any financial benefit from the recycling, so I never wanted to get paid for it, but I never wanted to be charged for it, which is the contract that we set up. When the markets changed, all of a sudden, my loads were needing to be 50% cardboard, or you were going to be charged. So, in essence, I'll give you an example of, I have a subscription, had a subscription service in town of Wells with about 1,800 customers. I was sending one truck around to pick up approximately 12 tons of trash, identical cost to pick up the recycling, same piece of equipment, basically, following the trash truck and picking up 2 tons of recycling. I took the 2 tons, brought it back to the transfer station, dumped it on the floor, processed it, took cardboard from other routes that I had, blended it in, reloaded it into open tops, trucked it up there, and still it's not good enough. It's not 50% cardboard. So in essence, they forced my hand, and I stopped doing curbside recycling and just put it all in one truck. If nothing else, I was saving the carbon footprint from running a diesel truck around the same miles. So to answer your question, at times it's been 100% contaminated, even when you've tried to clean it up. So, it really comes down to the economics. Everybody wants to do the right thing. People are passionate about their recycling. Nobody wants to hear the truth about what's happening with the brunt of it, but that's reality. And I think, having potentially a drop-off center, what I've talked with Lori and Nate on has been containers at the highway garage, potentially if you stop the curbside program. So there are savings because it takes a little bit longer to pick up more tonnage on the curb. But I've always told my customers, continue to sort it, because if the markets change, then we'll pick it up separately again. So I think that's really where you're at is, do you want to pay the extra money for the curbside program and the processing fees, or do you want to let it go as trash until the markets change? And it's not an easy decision, because I'm sure at your next meeting, you'll probably have 25 people in here chastising you for even considering stopping the recycling program, which I understand.
Well, you're not really recycling.
But it doesn't make
It's going in the
sense.
trash.
It's just, it's
waste.
a
I
feel
mean,
good.
you can go
That's all.
through all the trouble of recycling, and if it's all going into the
these-
fire, I mean,
Step up there, David.
it seems ridiculous to pay 3 times as much.
That's the age-old question, because even if EcoMaine takes it or it goes to a processing facility, if they can even take out 20 or 25%, you're still doing some sort of recycling, but the brunt of it, and I'm not just picking on EcoMaine, I'm talking about that nationally now.
Well, you just said that, it was like 90 to 100% of it was contaminated, so they're not recycling anything.
Anyway,
Hate to be the deliverer of bad news.
No, but it is what it is, and we need to
We need to know.
understand that.
Absolutely.
Do you see any future where this situation may change?
At some point in time, I mean, people ask me the question, and I've only done this for just short of 40 years, so, when I look into the crystal ball, my own personal opinion is we're a couple years away from the development of other facilities to be able to take some of this material and start to process it. The fear is, if you had all the money in the world and you wanted to start recycling, we'll say 3 to 7 plastics, 2 years from now, when you finally open the plant, who knows what's going to happen in Washington? Who knows what's going to happen in China? China might say, we want it all back, and instead of you getting paid $130 a ton, now you've built this building and there's no markets, there's no material because it's all going back to China. So even if you had all the money in the world, would I ever develop a recycling facility? Absolutely not.
I understand, I happened to work many years ago for Union Carbide Corporation and Dow Chemical, and we invested millions of dollars in trying to develop automated technology to separate glass, aluminum, paper, plastics. And it worked good as long as they were clean, but I understand the
Yeah.
contamination issue.
It's, you know, if you had your highway director go out and inspect every bin every week that there was recycling,
There you go, Mike.
On his bike.
you know, educating the people, with all the recycling, food waste programs that I initiated over the course of time, you can spend countless time and hours educating people, and then the people that come in at night afterwards, so your staff, as say a restaurant, would sort food and do a great job, and then the night cleaners would come in and contaminate the whole load. And, you know, it was so frustrating. So anyone who feels as if with great education, you're gonna have those that will and those that won't. And those that won't will spoil it for the rest of them.
What you're saying is it's a huge problem. It's not just something you can tweak around the edges.
No.
No, so, yeah, most of it ends up in being burnt and disposed of. The only way I know of to get rid of contaminated plastic is if it's a peanut butter jar, take it out to the animal shelter in West Kennebunkport. The dogs like to lick the inside. Now, what they do with it after that happens, I can't tell you.
Well, for example, if you were to not do the curbside program, Jill, I think you had a great idea, which was when we talked about having containers at the highway garage, because those people that truly want to recycle
Right.
and bring the material up there, your contamination factor probably won't be that much of an issue, and because you'll have people that really want to do it, and they're willing to drive to go and do that. I found that, I put a container at one of our beach parking lots, and the material that was in there, other than a few people that wanted to throw their trash in to avoid the paper bag, but that you could clean up. pretty
We don't
easily.
have that problem.
You don't have.
No.
Would
No.
you limit that to pasteboard and cardboard and,
I think that's a discussion that you'd have with.
Yeah,
Mike.
well, we already have 2 locations for cardboard now, one at Bradbury's and one down in Dock Square, so that shouldn't be an issue.
And those programs work well, but if you
Yes.
want to do metal or aluminum and keep your cardboard separate so people have a place to go,
Yeah.
I don't think you'd have that big of an issue with contamination, but that would be Nate's problem, not
I
mine.
have a question.
Yeah.
Question for the town manager. This is one of the more difficult discussions to try to follow and keep notes on. But I think, Laura, you said that for fiscal year this coming fiscal year, that solid waste would be $150 a ton and recycle would be $211 a ton.
160 for solid
160.
waste and 211 for
Okay, so
recycling.
following up on Stu's point, if we put all our recycle into solid waste, we're only paying $160 a ton versus $211 a ton.
Right.
And it's going to the same place anyway.
Well,
It-
most of it is, yeah.
Well, according to what they were saying, pretty much all of it is
90 to
going.
100%. You're way above the threshold of what they would accept.
Yeah,
In the
okay.
interest of moving this discussion along this evening, we still have a few more items to deal with. I think that, you know, we are gonna have to have another discussion about this at our next meeting, but ultimately, I think what's gonna happen is we're gonna have to have some sort of an in-house, as we've suggested, in the future. We have a recycling committee, perhaps we can get them more active and get community input. Because it does look like curbside recycling is gonna go the way of the dinosaur, if not this year, next year. But I don't want to do away with it completely, and I don't think anybody here does. So,
Can't you give the town manager some guidelines that maybe allow her to start negotiation on a deal where maybe we have selected recycle for cardboard and stuff, but,
we already have recycle for cardboard.
well, it's not open to the public.
Sure it is.
Yeah.
Take it down to
Yeah.
Bradbury's. I take all my cardboard to Bradbury's,
Yeah.
and there's
It's
another
been going
location
on
in
for
Dock
years,
Square.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we need to have a whole new education center, because absolutely, we're gonna have people
Right,
come and say,
right.
why you stop and recycle? You hate the planet, and you guys are evil, and they don't understand the truth about it, and we don't want to be those people. You know, we care as much about the planet as anybody, and if we're gonna spend some money, let's make sure that we're getting the planet's getting some benefit for it, not just so we can all pat ourselves on the back and say, yeah, we spent $210 a ton, so they could throw it, you know, burn
the
it or
trash.
landfill it, but I feel better because I recycled it.
So Lori, after all of this conversation, what do you need from us to be able to take next steps? Do you know where you need to go next?
I know that we need to keep investigating this issue, and we'll certainly be discussing it with the budget board, so we'll get some additional feedback there. But my first question is, are we interested in having a bid process? There's a limited market for vendors in the state of Maine, or whether we should continue to negotiate with Casella on a contract for this coming year.
I think we should go ahead and continue doing on the same path we've been going. Because they've done a wonderful job in the last one.
I would say forward motion.
Are you,
Been
so are
very
we
happy
talking about
with you guys.
recycling here or solid waste?
Well, it's everything.
I have no problem. These guys
Yeah.
have done a terrific job, and as our friends in Kennebunk are very envious that we don't charge them extra to throw away their trash.
And I would just like to compliment you on a job well done. 40 years,
Yes.
you did,
I
oh,
was still blonde then. When I started.
I still am.
I had hair back then, so.
Well, I'd
But,
like-
you know,
We all did.
kudos to you.
No, thank you, and I'd like to thank the townspeople, the town manager, and the board for all the years that you afforded us the privilege of coming over and servicing the town. It's been a great relationship, and appreciate that. I'm volunteering to do this, and I'll make myself available to your solid waste committee or to Lori and Mike, and I still will work with the folks at Casella. So, but I'm willing to be available for any questions you have, because it might be a little bit easier for me to give it to you now.
We certainly
Carl,
appreciate
thank
your coming out
His,
tonight,
your
Carl.
information was very important and very
Yes.
helpful to me.
Great.
I appreciate it.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
So I think that we will continue on the path that we are. So number 15, presentation of short-term rental committee results. Okay.
So you guys might want to back up.
Yeah. Be up on the
Come on
screen.
over, Sheila. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl.
Do you want to go out the back door? You're going to have the meeting after.
Looks like you're not Sheila.
Turn the light down or no?
I think it's fine that way. So, good evening, everyone. So this, tonight I'm just bringing you the report from the short-term rental committee. If you may recall, in the beginning of 2018, the Board of Selectmen put together an ad hoc committee to look at short-term rentals in Kennebunkport, and also just to take a look at the issue as it sits statewide and nationwide, and really to ask the question as to whether or not the town should consider doing any kind of regulation around its use. So that committee, I just want to give an acknowledgement to those folks. They were a great resource to have. So this committee consisted of Sheila Matthews-Bull, Jane Evelyn, Ann Hand, Marlene Rom, Susan Hill, Bill Yunker, Linda Flint, and David Nesher. So it was great to have that group help facilitate the conversation. So the issue and the topic of short-term rentals has really been, it's been a rather explosive topic nationwide with the continued expansion of online rental platforms such as Airbnb, HomeAway, VRBO, et cetera. So short-term rentals are generally understood to be the rental of a home or portions of a home, of a private home, to a single group for periods of less than 30 days. And so as you can imagine, the opinions around this, around short-term rentals are varied and extreme, from one end of the spectrum to the other. But regardless of the position that you take with this, I think, this is one of the most well-known components of what we now know and refer to as a shared economy. And it's something that's unlikely to diminish in use. In fact, I think we're going to see more and more of these shared economy elements increase. So the Brookings Institute did a study on short-term rentals. One of the things that it pointed out, and I think a lot of the folks that use short-term rentals are aware of it, that that type of use tends to be significantly cheaper than doing hotel rentals. In fact, in that particular report, I think they noted that the costs were somewhere between 30 to 60% cheaper than hotel rates worldwide. So the question is, ultimate is, what does this mean for Kennebunkport? As a vacation community, a popular coastal destination, you all have historically had short-term rentals. And I think, before the advent of the internet, you had primarily local real estate agents were handling rental requests. And so, when folks ask, how many of these have we had historically in town? The short answer is, well, we really don't know what we've had historically. So now I'd like to just go through a little bit of, some stats, the questions that we had on the survey that was mailed out, and just some general findings. So what has the committee been doing? We've had numerous public meetings since May of 2018. We've looked over local and national trends. We've had a robust public discussion on issues surrounding the potential of regulating short-term rentals, and also developed a survey to get better input on issues surrounding short-term rentals. So as we noted, short-term rentals, we're referring to less than 30 days. It typically caters to transient and tourist populations. It's a pretty, it's a significant part of the economy. Again, these are 2017 stats, but it's a pretty significant amount of revenue there in the state of Maine, $43 million. Average listing occupied 30 nights per year. Average stays are, almost 3 nights is what reporting from Airbnb was telling us. So what we did find in terms of housing stock in Kennebunkport, based on staff research, we came up with about 248 unique listings that were available online, which accounts for a little over 8% of the housing stock in Kennebunkport. So these 248, this would include properties that that may rent a room or participate in a whole house rental. This did not include, for instance, properties like Resort at Goose Rocks. Shows up on Airbnb and VRBO, nor did it include any of the hotels that also use that service. One of the questions that we've seen pointed out kind of nationwide has been, where does the ownership of your short-term rentals, who are the folks that own? What we know is that the majority of our property owners, are local, in terms of New England, and the majority of the, what I would say the locals are Kennebunkport property owners. So with our survey, we started out probably with about 25 questions, pared the process down to 9, sent out a little over 2,800 surveys, and received a little over 800 responded back, which what I'm told in terms of statistics is a pretty good response rate, in terms of surveys. Again, the surveys, where did we mail those out to? Again, being consistent with what our property ownership looks like, the majority was in the New England area, and our local mailing addresses were primarily in Kennebunkport. First question that we asked for, just trying to get some demographic data, was where folks identified where they lived. And so you'll see the majority of the respondents identified as being from the Goose Rocks area, second coming in with the Cape Porpoise area. Most folks identified as being a year-round resident and property owner, although a pretty close second, was our seasonal part-time resident and property owner. And part-time residents, and again, a lot of this, I don't think we necessarily were surprised at some of these answers. Whenever they come to stay in Kennebunkport, that they're usually using, their own home whenever they come to stay here. So we also asked, how folks felt about their neighborhood as it related to short-term rentals. Is it, were short-term rentals something that they, identified with? Could they tell if they had short-term rentals in their neighborhood? What did they observe? And again, not surprising, respondents from Goose Rocks, short-term rentals were common now and in the past, was the majority, answer of that particular question. We asked folks, if they were renting out their property, what type of service were they using? We still had quite a few folks using local real estate agents, for their rental services. The not applicable piece tells me is, that folks are using, they're using either other platforms or they're, or they were those respondents that, that really were not choosing to rent their property. We wanted to gauge, whether folks had been affected and whether they perceived that, being affected as a positive, negative, or didn't feel one way or the other. And you can see the majority of folks did not feel that they'd been affected either positively or negatively about short-term rentals. We wanted to understand, what folks' history was. Had they stayed at other short-term rentals elsewhere outside of Kennebunkport, or were they do they regularly use them or not? And so, you can see the majority have never taken part of a short-term rental, but quite a few, utilize short-term rental services outside of town as well. And then the big question that everybody always wanted to know is whether or not the town should regulate short-term rentals. And then if yes, what specifically? The majority did not favor the town regulating short-term rentals. I can tell you in terms of the, what we saw for comments on the yes, in terms of what folks were looking for, generally speaking, there were questions and issues surrounding maybe nuisance activity. There were issues related anywhere from noise to pedestrians, but primarily, behavior issues. Some of the responses actually were quite entertaining because people got descriptive. And so, and again, not really a surprise, but, the question was if the town votes to regulate short-term rentals, who should pay for, the cost of the regs? Overwhelming majority agreed that the property owner who owns a short-term rental should be the one responsible for, for the payment of the admin costs. So what else did we learn from the survey? We knew from the survey that we had, even though we had a good response rate, we had a pretty significant amount of folks that chose not to participate. We were also, because we asked folks to identify where they were from, we could take the data, and again, I could give you all more data, but we'd be here forever, kind of splitting it all out. But from the folks who identified from Goose Rocks, a significantly smaller group supported regulating short-term rentals, but yet in the village area, you had kind of the opposite. You had a higher percentage that supported regulating of short-term rentals. Cape Porpoise, was kind of somewhere in the middle. So from our public participation, one of the things that we heard, and we knew this, is that this is a complicated issue for sure, in that, there are, a multitude of questions and issues surrounding short-term rentals. We know that the port's a vacation community. We know that it's historically been a part of town, specifically Goose Rocks Beach. We heard from property owners that, that do rent short-term, that they're heavily invested in their properties and have significant concerns about what regulations may look like, and what the town is considering in terms of pursuing. Many of them, gave testimony about, that the income was a necessary component for their financial stability. They were a highly invested group, ensuring that their properties are well-maintained, properly insured, and problem guests aren't invited back. I think was one of the consistent things that, that we heard throughout. Speaking for myself, it was a good educational process, hearing, that I would say the majority of short-term rental owners, were expressing a high degree of, what I would say was responsibility in terms of, having insurance and vetting their guests. And of course, it was pointed out that local businesses also experience a positive effect with the presence of short-term rentals. So the committee itself, I also polled the committee and wanted to get some of their individual thoughts and comments. We think that considering a review of our local nuisance ordinances related to noise, traffic, and parking is an important consideration. Again, specifically too, if we were to go through a lot of the comments, you would find that the regulatory comments were, I would say, more tilted towards kind of some of the nuisance behavior. One of the other considerations to consider was, the thought of limiting short-term rentals in certain areas, such as down private roads, primary residential areas. We've talked about, simplified ways to determine noise issues. Noise complaints are difficult animal to chase down, and specifically because a lot of it is perception, and a lot of those complaints, I think, happen at, late hours in the evening or at night. And one recommendation was to not do anything at this particular point. You'll see towards the end one consideration that we were suggesting is that we should monitor the level of short-term rentals over the next few years, just to get a baseline trend to see what the numbers are doing. Are we seeing significant increases? Because we don't have a baseline in terms of knowing how many of these that we have in town. Another suggestion was consider basic registration, just for the purpose of having owner contact info, and maybe a way to start tagging complaints to particular properties. And an interesting opinion that was pointed out was that, a lot as properties are turned over and are renovated, and in a lot of cases torn down and rebuilt, that a lot of the traditional short-term rentals have changed and are not necessarily the same short-term rentals that the town may have seen in the past. So observations from staff, again, what we said, specific complaints were primarily around behavior issues. What we do know is that data regarding complaints is not being tracked in such a manner that is that's easy to analyze or attribute specifically to short-term renters. And should the town choose to put an ordinance into place, the cost of enforcements are going to vary significantly based on how complex the ordinance would be. Some additional issues, that are that are common, that we commonly hear, and then, here's what we found. We commonly hear, full-time residences are being converted to short-term rentals, but, without some type of a registry to where we can track this, this is something that, again, kind of remains an opinion without any basis in fact. We often hear that, that folks who are buying properties in town are doing so specifically for short-term rentals, and as such that is artificially increasing the sales price. Again, we don't have any data to support that specifically that says, we don't have a questionnaire that says, all right, now that you've purchased your property, how do you intend to use it? And if you intend to use it as a short-term rental, how did that affect your, the ultimate purchase price? We just don't have that, that level of data. Noise and trash issues, a perception is that they've increased due to visitors who stay at short-term rentals. And again, our data collection tools, we're not able to really parse out the complaints to attribute them to short-term vacation users versus full-time residents or property owners. And then one of the other issues is that the belief that Kennebunkport has less residents and more empty second homes that are short-term rentals. And what we do know is that non-resident ownership of residential property is increasing. Now, we can't say that that's specifically tied to short-term rentals, but generally speaking, we know that the housing stock continues to increase, and with the increase in the housing stock, we don't see a proportional increase in the local population. And so, assuming that those, since those folks are not part of the local population, we make the assumption that those are second homes. But we don't make the assumption that those are short-term rentals. Again, this just gives you an idea of what we see in terms of new housing units, on an annual basis, but yet, because we have separate databases for each year, you can see what we had in terms of additional new local mailing addresses that are added. So you can see how that our housing stock is, I would say, primarily feeding into the second home demand. So questions that we're still left with, are short-term rentals increasing in town? And I think a struggle is, how many is too many? I don't have the answer to that question. Complaints, how many of them are because of short-term rentals, and whether or not our nuisance ordinances in their current form, if they're effective. And so things that I'll leave the board to consider is that we would recommend some trend monitoring of short-term rentals to begin a process of collecting some data regarding some of these numbers, and also just a kind of a multi-departmental review of our current nuisance ordinances that we have in terms of their effectiveness and whether or not there are, modifications that we can make to how we collect the data or the data that we have to see if it can be attributed to, how much of it can be attributed to short-term rentals. So, this is an ongoing discussion for sure, nationwide. One thing that, that I'll point out as well, even, so this year, there's currently, a bill that's been introduced in the legislature, and we'll keep an eye on it in terms of seeing what happens with it. But it's been introduced, a reg that would specifically prohibit communities from regulating short-term rentals that have an occupancy of 4 or less. And except in the sense that a community could regulate very narrowly public health and safety issues. So we'll see where that one goes. Sounds to me like someone had a bad experience, but that's what I have, and certainly welcome any questions from the board.
I think you did a wonderful job.
Very comprehensive.
Everybody.
Thank you, Warner.
I've got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Do you based on everything, as you were going through the information you received back, do you think that if there was a way to control the nuisance aspect of it more, people would be less, more inclined to let people do the renting as they see fit? In other words, it doesn't impact them otherwise, but the nuisance seems to be the issue?
Well, I think the nuisance, the nuisance issues are what bring attention
Right.
to it. So even as I read other articles about, issues that other communities have, that's one of the things that brings it to the forefront in terms of attention. Is that if there's a particular, if there's a noise issue or,
Right.
or something of that nature, I think that, enforcement of nuisance regs is reactive, and so you have to have the problem in order to respond to it. I think it gives a certain level of maybe satisfaction to the folks that, the town may be responding to it in a more proactive way. Does it curb it? I don't know.
Well, is there a sense that if we were to do it more aggressively, that people say, well, we're trying to stay on top of it, and we can live with the results, because they're not going to get out of hand?
Yeah. The fact that, the majority of the respondents didn't feel as if they were affected one way or the other, by,
Right.
by short-term rentals as a nuisance issue. I don't know, Pat. I think there's a couple, there's probably a couple of properties in a couple of areas that, that are,
More sensitive?
that's right, that are more sensitive, due to density, or maybe the size of the property that's being rented.
Yeah, okay.
Werner, I think it's a great study, good information. My personal bias, though, is the definition of short-term rentals. I think people, and I've rented a lot of places, and I've lived in areas where I own a home down on the Jersey Shore, and a lot of people rent. And my observation is people that rent for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks tend, number one, to be families, and they often tend to be repeat rentals. They like it, they come back again. And they don't tend to be the problems.
Right.
The problems tend to be, particularly with Airbnb, when you come in and somebody rents for the weekend or 3 days. They don't tend to come back. They come up, and they often tend to have a party
Right.
and create a nuisance activity. I don't think that happens so much when the family rents a place for 2 weeks. It may be noisy kids, but they don't have drinking parties every night and things like that. So I would have liked to have seen more focus on short-term rentals as being something less than a week. Weekend-type rentals, and there's an awful lot of that goes on Airbnb
Right.
and the other online rental facilities, but just an observation.
Yeah, it's valid.
Absolutely.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sharon McCabe. I'm an owner of a property here in Kennebunkport and a taxpayer, as we all are. And I just wanted to thank the committee members, Werner, and the whole committee, and yourselves for trying to investigate this issue. I know it's an issue throughout the country. Also, Ms. Smith has been very helpful as well, so thank you for your help. I'm really here, actually from Orlando, Florida. I took a flight this morning at 6 a.m. to be here. I am a snowbird, and I'm not here in the winter. I can't imagine why. I guess it's that snow that I see on the ground. But I wanted to thank everybody for their time and their energies. And I just wanted to reiterate what we have found as a group, the short-term rental owners. I'm sort of like the unofficial representative for this group of people in our area. And even some of the business people that I spoke to, several people helped me to send out surveys of our own and to find out what the response would be to what happens with short-term rentals in the area. And listening to the education we got from Werner and the committee as well, it really did seem like there weren't too many complaints at all, and that they really couldn't determine where the complaints were coming from. That, again, I'm just reiterating and just trying to pinpoint the reason why sometimes things happen and in certain areas things get restricted. But it seems like we are in a situation here, it's vacation land. My husband and I have been coming to Kennebunkport for 35 years. And we own a property here. We also own a property in Kennebunk. And I think the reason that we're able to do that and to come here and to enjoy the community and enjoy the festivities and bring our families here, and our families want to move here as well, is because we're able to rent out the property at times, not for 3 days, but for a week or more. We have a winter rental, and right now a young couple who are relocating back to Kennebunk or Kennebunkport, and they're buying a house, and they're staying with us from October until June. And since we're in Florida in the winter time, and we're able to do that. But I guess my point is there are so many benefits to the area with the short-term rental and the share of what happens, just in terms of, the owner gets to pay some of the bills, but at the same time, the community gets to benefit by all of the business that these people bring, and they are family people. We don't rent to anyone who really isn't a family. We don't rent short-term for 3 days, or normally it's a week, 2 weeks, a month, and again, I think, I know for us and for most of the people I've spoken to, there really has been no problem here with the folks that are renting in Kennebunkport. I don't know if that's because it's such a family-oriented area, or, people love it so much it's a vacation spot. And so I would hate to see anything interfere with that sense of community and that sense of vacation land, because it really is very, very helpful to the area. And it also makes people want to be here. So I just wanted to say again, thank you for your efforts and for listening. And I found 99.9% of the results that we got as well, that this is a very special community. And it's not like Portland or some other areas that had a problem and they had to do things because things just got out of hand. And my husband and I recently, over the summer, came for like 3 or 4 weeks, and we went to Portland and took a walk through the area, and we said, wow, this has really gotten a little rough, some of the areas. And again, we've been 35 years coming here. And, so the comparison of certain areas probably aren't appropriate, because this is a very special community. And so we hope that things will continue to be as positive for not only the rental owners and the business owners, but also all the families that come to the area and the surrounding neighbors. Because that's the other thing that we talked quite a bit about, is that if there was a problem, we would be the first as owners to address it and not let things go and disturb the neighbors or have an excess of garbage. For us, on Saturday is our checkout day. We hired Oceanside to come in specially to take the garbage away for those folks, because that is our responsibility. And I know a lot of my fellow owners do the same thing. There's not, we don't want a complaint. We don't want a mess. We don't want a lot of noise. We have a lot of rules. And those rules help to keep everything very appropriate but enjoyable at the same time. So all right, so thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it. I don't know if you have any questions of me, but.
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
I think, for me, it's not so much talking about nuisance. For me, it's more about, and we're not going to, first of all, I want to say the board is not going to take any action on this evening. You know, this is an informational meeting. But it's more about a tipping point. You know, I've lived here my entire life, that's 50 years, and the town has changed tremendously in the last 20 years. And when I grew up here, it was mostly people who lived here year-round, and people who'd been here for generation upon generation. Now, that changed, and there's no amount of regulation would have probably prevented that. You know, our proximity to the greater Boston area certainly, you know, spelled our demise as a small, very quiet coastal community. But the number of 8% of homes in this town being rented short-term, that's a lot. And while I don't think it's the problem today, if we get to 15% or 25%, that's gonna be a problem. And this is the reason that I asked to have this looked into. This wasn't just looked into because I asked for it. Let me be clear about that. But I do think that the town going forward is going to have, at the very least, going to have to monitor and ask people to have some sort of registration so that we know how many homes are being rented short-term. You know, the state requires you to have a resale tax certificate, as you know. As I own rental property, and I chose for myself to rent them annually so that I could rent to people who lived here year-round, and that's what I do. But that doesn't mean that because I choose that I wish to impose that on other people. My idea is more that I don't want to see our community change dramatically and people look back in 5 years and say, well, you should have done something about it. And we say, we didn't even see it coming. So, you know, that's where I come from on this. And again, we're not going to take any action this evening. So, Greg, I'm going to let you speak, and then, absolutely, yeah, and you're going to be the last one on this, because we still have a lot to cover this evening.
So I'm going to come at this from a little bit of a different angle. So I grew up in town. I lived here my entire life until I went to school and had to go get a job, and caused me to move out of town. I want to be back in town very badly. I recently purchased a house in town, doing a ton of work, getting ready. I could not be back here even the 3 days a week that I'm here if renting for a few nights a week here and there wasn't a possibility. So I bought the house not even thinking that it was be a possibility that I couldn't recoup a little bit of taxes or insurance or mortgage here and there. So I think this is actually a fantastic tool for young people in the town. And I actually am very close friends with 3 families that have been renting out on a short-term basis in the summertime. And they all have kids in town. They all send their kids to Consolidated. And these families wouldn't be able to be in town unless they had the option of short-term renting. And their families are in town as well. So when they rent out for a week, weekend, whatever, they'll go and stay with their families. Property prices in town are high. Average home price is $500,000. You're never going to be able to buy a house in town with the intent of renting it out on a short-term rental basis for a profit. We saw some of the stats that the average owner makes $6,900 a year. That's not going to pay for anything. So I have a strong opinion that most of the short-term rentals that are happening are homeowners that want to use their home that can't afford the home otherwise, and it's a great tool to be able to take a butt of the chunk out. And the short-term rentals aren't driving house prices up. The desirability of the town are driving house prices up. So to take a tool away from having a young family be able to afford to stay in town, it's kind of hard to swallow. And I guess I'll leave it at that. I'm really passionate about it. I want to come back to town. This is where I want to be. probably gonna be 5 or 10 years before I can move my family up here full-time. But I'm here every weekend. When my house will be rented, I'll still be in town. I'll be staying in my parents' guest room, like I've been doing for the past 10 years. But I'm at the point that I'd like a little bit more space, and the opportunity and idea that I could own a house in town where I grew up. This is it. This is where I want to be, and this is how I can do it. I don't see another way that I could.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. Nice to have you back.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you decide to do another committee, he needs to be on it.
Okay.
That's fine, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna just say one very brief thing here, you know, it is not our intention to absolutely stop this. It's not our intention probably to stop anybody who's doing it today, but if we don't find out where we are, we're not gonna know where we're going. And we don't wanna wake up one day and say, how did we get here and why didn't we do something about this? So that's all that I have to say, and there'll be much more discussion about this in the future. And I really appreciate you flying up from Florida. I wish you'd brought some warmer weather with you.
I wish I did too, I'm sorry.
My mother lives in Florida, and she loves to call me and tell me how warm it is down there. But I call her in July and tell her how beautiful it is here. So anyways, without any more discussion, I'd like to...
For the record, I'd like it to show that I was born in Florida. I live here year-round.
But you moved to Brazil, so you probably
No,
thought Florida was
that-
cold.
That was another time in my life. I've been here 20 years almost, full-time. Yeah, just saying.
Well, I'd like to thank the short-term rental committee for all their work. I know that it couldn't have been easy, and you guys...
Had a lot of good public input.
Yes, so I hear. And I thank everybody that came out tonight. I know that you all didn't speak, and we do appreciate that.
Very
And there are
much.
probably those of you wish that I didn't speak, but thank you. And we will be having more discussion in the future. Okay, moving on. Number 16, discussion of donation of tax-acquired parcel, also known as the ice skating rink lot on Main Street in Cape Porpoise, to the Kennebunkport Heritage House Trust. Lori?
So, you know where the current ice skating rink parcel is. As part of the budget proposal that you're going to see, we're looking to, the ice skating rink needs quite a bit of work. And so as we examined what it would take and cost to put that in a shape that we could actually use it on a seasonal basis, we also looked at the option of a portable rink that we could put at Parsons Field. And with the construction of the new Parks and Rec building, we thought that it made a lot of sense to have it at Parsons Field so that there's access to the public restrooms and the other facilities there and parking. The Housing Trust has been working on their plan and their desire to create affordable housing here. And so as town manager, I also sit on that board. And there has been discussion there and an interest to ask the selectmen whether or not they would be willing to donate the ice skating rink parcel to the Housing Trust for that purpose. One of the, as you know, the land is probably not as developable as you would like. The issue here is that, Kennebunkport in itself has a lot of challenges in terms of development. However, most of the land that they would have donated to them is not going to be the prime real estate in town anyway. So they are interested in it, and we thought that we would have a discussion amongst the board about that idea.
Thoughts?
I think it's a wonderful idea. I really do. I think it's a win-win for the town, for everything. Perfect location to start out with. It's close to Cape Porpoise Center, Kennebunkport Center, the beaches. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think it's a good start, I think.
It is.
What's the size of the parcel?
It's about 4 acres. Yeah, plus, it's a little over.
What I like about it is that it's something one, it's in a location that I think is really appealing for what we're, for what the trust is looking to do, to make living in town and living in our community something that's possible for people. I also really like the fact that it's something that would be fairly quick out of the gate should we choose to move on it as an opportunity. So I tend to find myself pretty excited about the opportunity, obviously eager to hear conversation and other thoughts and positions on it, but I personally think it's a pretty exciting opportunity.
If I may.
Yes, please, Pat.
Yeah, because I also sit as a selectman, I'm also the selectman's representative to the Kennebunkport Housing Trust, and I'm the president of the board of directors. So what attracted us to this parcel initially was that it has visibility in town. It's close to the schools. The idea of attracting young families to move back into the area, and by extension, either have kids for the school or work in town, was very attractive. The parcel offers a couple of things because there isn't a lot of tax-acquired land in Kennebunkport to do this kind of housing, because this is one of the parcels that is readily available. It has water right across the street. We can bring water into the town, which allows us to put 3, maybe 4 houses on the lot. And so this is the way that if you want to have a successful effort, you look for what brings the most reward. And this is why we were very attracted to this parcel, which is, for us, it would be an ideal first start, so.
And we need young families.
Well, that's the idea behind this. So,
Okay. Moving on. Number 17, consider a bond size, amortization, and payment schedule for village parcel. We're not gonna have a
Yeah,
decision
it's,
tonight.
it was just a discussion.
Yeah,
to kind of do a weather check.
yes.
There- That'll come later, I guess.
Lori?
So at your last meeting, Joe Katera, our financial advisor, was here to discuss the bonding of the village parcel. We are recommending that we use a 15-85% ratio, 15% for public use, based on our discussion, and 85% for private use. There are 3 options that we need to consider if you are agreement on that ratio. One would be that we do a fixed principal payment on both private and public. That would pay the debt down quickly, but it would also front-load the payments in the early years. The second option would be to do a fixed payment on the public portion, like a normal municipal bond, and to do fixed payments, think of them as mortgage payments, on the private portion. It would smooth out the payment schedule so that it's not front-loaded in the early years. On option 3 he gave you was on the private portion, was that we could do a 5-year balloon payment. The 5-year balloon payment would not front-load the costs, but it would also give you some time to figure out what the property will be used for. If there are any sales or revenues generated from the property, you could use those funds to buy the debt down after 5 years. And you would have to refinance after 5 years, but you could finance perhaps a lower debt amount. The cons on the balloon payment are that we don't know what the interest rate will be in 5 years, and so there is some risk associated with that. So that's my quick synopsis of the options, and I don't know if the board has had any thoughts about that or needs additional information before making a decision.
We should have put this on the first part of the agenda when we were still awake.
No.
Actually, I looked over the options. Did you have something to say,
No,
Stu? I'm
actually,
sorry.
I'm eager to hear where you were going with it.
Oh, let me look through the notes here. We had some options in here, and I was looking through these today before I came in.
What, the three options for the?
Yes, I think option, oh, good. Where are we here? 18, yeah, next page. 17? Well, I
Yeah.
swear today when I was looking through
Let me,
here, I had seen the options.
jump in now.
Please, Pat,
While you're
please save
finding
me
this-
from myself.
No, because there are three options there, and the pros and cons, you take a look at what's in play. To me, in my way of thinking, option 3 offers the most flexibility, but at the same time, it could potentially put you in a situation where you've got to pay financing charges for bonding twice, and you don't know what the interest rate will be in 5 years. But it allows you to make the most effective moves in a 5-year period, because we will know by then what we want to do with a lot, and so we can have a choice that makes the most sense for the town. To my way of thinking, option 3 would be the most attractive.
I'm with you on that, Pat. I agree.
I found it.
That's where I
In the
landed as
front.
well, so.
I think that's the best for us. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I liked it when Joe was explaining, and I found that to be the most appealing.
I like the low interest personally.
You've always liked low interest.
Yes.
Well-
Okay, now that I've read it again, yes, option 3 was the one I was gonna propose, so.
I think it gives us a lot more flexibility.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, and in 5 to 10 years, we'll have a better idea of what's going on over there.
Yeah, but don't you think if we took out I'm just throwing this out, if we took out the bond now, where interest rates are still very low, that, say we did wind up selling a piece of it to the public, we could take that money and just throw it down on the bond.
That's what we can do in option 3.
We can do the same thing,
Yeah.
the only
But in
difference is.
5 years, you don't know what the interest rate's gonna be.
True, but you're gonna pay a penalty if you go above a certain percentage of your asset value that you sell to the public versus municipal
Right.
use. And you're gonna pay increased taxes on that if you go into that range. Whereas this method, okay, allows us to accept the front-end risk of having some choices as to where we see the land dividing up. And so you're trading one risk for another. You're saying, okay, so let's look at, are we gonna have more public-private partnerships where we're carving off chunks of this land to public or to private interests for development? And if that's a yes, we're probably gonna get more money back, we can pay down the bond better, but we risk the interest rate on that piece of it, right? In other words, you're gonna pay a penalty, and correct me if I speak incorrectly here, but my impression is that if you use more of the land for private use than you anticipated, there's a penalty that you would pay on the tax end of things, because you're paying a lower interest rate on the presumption that it's town use or municipal use.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And inflation will soften a lot of the interest rate, if it even goes up. I mean, we have sat at this very table and argued about interest rates, I believe, when we were talking about the renovation of the police station.
Right.
And some people said the interest rates would go up, and I said they wouldn't, and just by pure dumb luck, I was right. But given the, mindset, it's hard to know. We don't know.
We don't know.
And, just the fact that we will know more in 5 to 10 years about our actual development, I think it makes it very attractive.
It's a balanced risk, there's risk on
Yeah.
one side in that we don't know how much of what we wanna do would fall in the public realm or the private realm, and we don't know what the interest rates are gonna be in 5 years. But if we do a longer term and we opt for more private than public, we face for sure a penalty.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Lori, is that how you see it as well?
Right now, we're looking at minimum property staying public, but if we were to keep more, we could have a lower interest rate in the future anyway. So if we do option 1 or 2, you can call the bond in 10 years. You cannot call it before 10 years. So in 10 years, you could refinance it just because the interest rate's lower potentially, or because you want to buy the debt down and refinance a smaller amount. The balloon payment gives you a shorter window to do that. But in either case, you don't know what the future holds. So if you're very risk averse, then you would want to lock in now at what we know we have. And if you see the benefits of, if the interest rates don't rise and we refinance even the same amount in 5 years, we actually pay a little less interest. So it works.
I don't see them staying the same, but
Right,
that's okay.
but that's the question, is what will happen in 5 years?
Right, there was a gain, there was a net gain of doing this.
Quite a bit
because
of
you-
money, actually.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Okay.
Do you need a vote tonight, Lori?
If you're ready for a vote, then we
Are
would
you guys
proceed.
ready?
But if you want to sit on it for a little while, that's fine too.
Sheila, are you comfortable enough to vote, or do you?
Nope.
Will you ever be comfortable?
I don't know.
Do you want to
It's
wait? or do you
absolutely a
feel like-
lot to take in, and I had to go through and reread everything, and,
And
Joe
I-
did such an excellent presentation, but at some point you start to glass over. with-
And I can invite Joe back again if you want to answer any other questions.
Well, you weren't here for Joe's thing, were you?
No, I wasn't.
No,
you
that's
weren't.
right, yeah. He did a
Did you
tremendous
have an opportunity
presentation.
to check it out on, I'm not gonna put you on the spot, don't answer the question.
Yeah.
Because hopefully you didn't. But it was instructive, and it's what helped me get to where I am right now.
He was very good.
Yeah.
He explained it really well.
When do you need to know,
Well,
Lori?
I will take all your word for it because I wasn't here. So
Okay.
Do you want him to?
I would
We might
abstain.
be able to have him come back, right?
I could,
No, no, no. I
I
mean,
could
if you-
definitely bring him back.
If four of you are.
His fee doesn't increase how many
Yeah.
times he comes.
I think what I'm hearing Sheila say, though, is that
It's
she's
gonna be-
comfortable,
I'm gonna
she'll
abstain.
abstain because she wasn't here.
Okay.
Right.
But you'll have 4 in favor and an
Anyway.
abstention,
Okay.
probably.
Yep.
So would you
Do I
like a
have a
vote so you
motion?
can move forward? I move that.
Okay,
Second it?
Second.
all in favor? 4 in favor, 1 abstention. All right, thank you.
So option 3.
Option
Option
three.
3, yes.
Right.
Authorize, number 18, authorized contract with Mitchell Associates for Village Parcel Master Plan. Oh. Yep. I'm sorry, Lori? Number 7.
So last, November, December, when did we put that out? November?
Yeah.
We put out the RFP for the village master plan parcel process. We received 4 proposals. We had a team, and Stuart sat on that team and interviewed all 4 groups. From that discussion, we really liked 2 of the groups and wanted to see if we couldn't combine some of the strengths of both. So we worked over the next really 2 months trying to do that. And so I bring forward to you tonight a contract with Mitchell Associates, who would be the primary vendor that we would be dealing with. But the team would consist of Mitchell Associates in Portland, Camoin Associates, who also did our housing study and do economic analysis. Goral Palmer, who would be doing the engineering and the planning. And then Principal, which is a Boston and Portland firm who does planning as well as a lot of architect and landscape architect work. We think that this would be a strong team. The goal would be that over 2019, we partake in a public planning process. And by the fall, we'll know, what direction the community wants us to go in.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, having sat on this committee and been part of the interviews and part of whittling it down, or at least having the opportunity to throw my 2 cents in, this is an opportunity where I think Lori has been able to negotiate a cake and eat it too scenario. We're really impressed for very different reasons with these 2 groups. And to the opportunity to bring the capacity of each of these divergent parts together under one roof, which didn't exist. When they walked through the door as diverse, unique units, you were going to be giving up one or the other of their particular strengths. And this has cobbled together the really very best of each of a couple of different groups, and to me, I'm really excited about it. I think
Great.
it's
Does
cool.
that mean I have a motion?
That is a motion.
All right.
Second.
That I'll second.
For $100,415, that's the motion?
Yes.
Okay, and I have a second, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, and we need some money to pay for that, don't we, Lori?
Yes.
Okay, so we need to authorize some contingency funds, is that correct?
I'd be looking for you to commit the 30,000 in contingency funds we have in the FY19 budget towards this.
Stu, did I hear you make a motion?
That was a motion.
Okay,
Second.
all in favor? All right, the ayes have it. Okay. Do you
And-
need the other 45, or is that already in there?
The other 45 you already brought
Perfect.
forward from last year for planning services.
Okay, number 19.
Oh,
Did
you
we
got
want to
another
talk
question?
about the steering committee
Steering
as well?
committee.
Oh,
Steering committee, the next question down. Just right there, under the 100,000. The next question is whether we will have a
Oh,
steering committee
yep.
for the village planning.
it's not on my regular agenda,
Right.
apologies. Yeah, yes, we can discuss that, the steering committee who will oversee this parcel.
Well, oversee the study of the parcel, right, and the,
I mean, what I have heard from the board in individual discussions is that certainly they want a strong representation from the Board of Selectmen, but they would be looking for a few citizens to assist them in the steering of the public process and design. So we will then advertise for people, yes?
Yes,
Yes, please.
So if people are interested, they can fill out our volunteer application form on our
Too bad
website.
Greg left.
I think the best way to get the right answer is to have more people involved than just us.
Yeah,
unfortunately Greg's not a resident.
I know, I'm kidding.
He's a good kid, he's a good man.
okay, that doesn't need a vote, so.
No.
Correct.
Okay, so now moving on to number 19, authorize a one-year extension for auditing services with RKO.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Very good. Okay,
I like them.
yes. Number 20, authorize a waiver of tree growth penalty on the village parcel map 12, block 5, lot 21.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, and 21, authorize quit claim deed for property owned by Lisa Gunther, located at 133 Main Street, map 22, block 3, lot 9.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? And we're getting there. Number 22, other business, Alan. Stewart.
Nothing, thanks.
Nothing.
Pat.
Nothing.
Lori.
No?
You have no other
What?
business.
Didn't I have enough on the agenda for you?
All right.
Wow.
And I've already spoken more than I planned on this evening, so,
I would move the warrant then.
all right.
Second.
All in favor?
Move to adjourn.
Well,
Second.
I just want to say, for those following at home, we will not be having executive session tonight. So I had a motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor? Thank you. Meeting closed. Good work, team.
Yeah.
Wow, this
That was a lot.